Hi, my name is Arun Ravi, and I'm the product lead for Amazon Comprehend Medical. I'm here with James Wiggins, Senior Solutions Architect of the Healthcare Life Sciences Group. We're here to talk about AI-powered health data masking. So again, it's good to reiterate our mission at AWS. We really want to put machine learning in the hands of every developer and make it as easy to leverage in any sort of pipeline that you're developing. Here's a quick view of some of our AWS healthcare customers. As you can see, we work across the gamut from, in the provider space, in the healthcare IT space, and also in the pharma space. And there's a lot of customers that are leveraging various services on AWS to achieve their use case. And we're really excited to talk about how you can leverage Comprehend Medical in data masking. So what exactly is the customer problem? So we're going to talk about the customer problem that we're solving with the data masking tool, and also get into the customer problem that Comprehend Medical solves, just to kind of level set what we're trying to do. As you guys know, the inclusion of protected health information can really limit the usefulness of health data across multiple applications, and PHI is very difficult to detect and remove. According to the safe harbor method of de-identification, you have 18 identifiers that you need to essentially identify and remove, and it becomes really difficult when you're looking at the variety and the variations that exist in clinical notes in general. In this use case, we're going to talk about how you can de-identify or mask rather health data in clinical notes, but also in images as well. A quick view of our agenda. I'm going to give a very quick overview of the AI/ML technology stack on AWS. We're going to talk about natural language processing on AWS, specifically in the medical domain, which is Comprehend Medical. Talk a little bit about recognition, which can also be leveraged. It's basically our computer vision service, and it can be leveraged in helping mask information on medical images. And and James will talk more about the solution with the demo. So here's the AWS ML stack, and I like starting from the top because what that does is it essentially starts from a managed service and goes down. What that means is if the managed service is not able to get to the accuracy that you require for your use case, you can go further down to further tweak or add or essentially create more layers that can get the accuracy that you need. So the services that we're going to be talking about today are Recognition, which is our computer vision machine learning service, and Comprehend Medical, which is our medical NLP service. Again, I always recommend start from the top because this is very simple API-driven services. You put data in, you get an output. You don't like the output, you come tell the team why, and we'll do our best to fix it. As you require more depth, you can go to SageMaker, and if you require, kind of tweaking the frameworks, you can go to the ML framework and infrastructure level. So let's talk a little bit about Comprehend Medical and what the service provides and the different levels of data we provide as you throw input in the API and as you get the relevant JSON output. So the problem we're really trying to solve is there's 1.2 billion unstructured clinical documents that are created every year. A lot of critical information is trapped in these documents. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to extract insights. If you look at patient history in general, you could have essentially pages and pages and pages of clinical notes. How do you actually extract the relevant information to create maybe a summarized view of the patient or create a much more powerful population health platform? A lot of this is in unstructured data. So 80% of a patient's record is unstructured. Now, how do you create a better single lens in order to push our providers, or not necessarily push, but give them the insight that they need to make quicker decisions and really focus on patient care? And that's one of the driving factors in creating Comprehend Medical, is just really to reduce the burden that exists because of the amount of data that's created in healthcare. So let's look what Comprehend Medical does through the API. So there's 3 levels that essentially that I'll talk through, and all of this is done through one simple API call. I'd like to, before I start, mention that the service is HIPAA eligible and it's stateless, which means that there's no customer data stored through the service. We don't train any of our models on customer data, and we think very highly of our training data set, and so we took that decision early on. So you don't have to worry about any of this information being stored anywhere. We don't even keep logs. So at a base level, we extract 5 entities. The 5 entities are medication, medical condition, test treatments, procedures, anatomical terms, and PHI, protected health information. All of these entities have subtypes. So medication will have dosage, route or mode, strength, frequency, etc. Medical condition could have various factors. Test treatment procedures would be, blood pressure and the actual value. And then, with anatomy, you have the actual anatomical site, the direction, etc. But if I just provided these subtypes without context, it really doesn't make any sense. So in the example, Arun is taking 81 milligrams of aspirin once daily. If I just gave you 81 milligrams, that really wouldn't be useful. So the second step that we run through the API is something called relationship extraction. What it does is it ties these subtypes back to the parent. So in that example, Arun is taking 81 milligrams of aspirin once daily. The 81 milligrams aspirin and once daily will be extracted. But now the 81 milligrams and once daily is tied back to the aspirin. So now you can make much more accurate structured semantic searches because essentially it's connected. And that's something we call relationship extraction. So a great use case that we've had customers use this service for is trying to identify patients for a clinical trial. Now, if you're looking at non-small cell lung cancer, stage 3B, taking gemcitabine, taking cisplatin, maybe Avastin, showing signs of nausea and vomiting, how do you actually find that patient? Being able to extract the right entities and essentially make it very easy to search is one of the most popular use cases because you can find patient cohorts very, very quickly. So we do relationship extraction for medication, and we do it for test treatments and procedures. An example could be a MRSA screening or an MRSA screening that's positive. The positive is tied to the screening. Could be the blood pressure and the actual result of that, and that value is tied back to blood pressure. So right now we do relationship extraction for those two major entity categories. But we didn't want to stop there. We realized that there's still more contextual information we could provide, and we call these entity traits. The traits we launched with are negation. So an example of negation could be patient denies taking this medication. Patient is not showing these signs or symptoms. So we extract the entity, but we tell you it's negated. Now, if you're trying to do a patient retrospective where you want to see okay, what are the medications that this patient has been put on, you would not take that value because it's been negated. The second is we differentiate between a diagnosis, sign, or symptom. And the reason that's important is, diagnosis has a code, an ICD-10 code, but it's also the culmination of various data points. Sign or symptom, one is physician reported and one is patient reported. So it's very important to differentiate that. And the use case where that's used heavily is in medical coding. When you actually need to extract the diagnosis or find all the diagnosis that exists in clinical notes, unstructured clinical notes, it's very difficult because you need to be able to differentiate between sign, symptom, and diagnosis. And our ability to provide that back to our customers allows them to kind of go through the documents that are required for reimbursement a lot more quickly. So again, the service is HIPAA eligible and stateless. So that, the functionality I just talked about is with the NERE API, which is the named entity and relationship extraction API. The one that we'll be demoing and talking about a lot today is the PHI the API. So basically, it extracts all those 18 identifiers that I mentioned, and we give you the offset where it's located, the accuracy. And so you get a lot of flexibility in terms of the output of both the APIs that Comprehend Medical supports. And what we're really trying to do, as we do with any of the machine learning services at AWS, we want to distill a very complex process into a simple API call. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but just to talk about the use cases where Comprehend Medical is being leveraged, as you can see, it's across different stakeholders in healthcare. With patient and population health analytics, how do you create a single view of the patient at any given time? How do you actually make it easier to understand what has happened to the patient over a certain course of time and condense that information into something that's actionable? Whether you're looking at a large population or whether you're looking at a single patient, the ability to do that is extremely important to make much more relevant medical decisions at the point of care. And, it helps a lot of physicians to really know what the patient has been through over a course of time, because they may not see the same physician every single time that they have a visit. So being able to do that is extremely valuable. Revenue cycle management, we talked a little bit about the medical coding, being able to extract the diagnosis and tie it to a code. But in the end, we're really trying to give these coders a superpower. For them to do it, again, faster and much more efficiently allows them to go through more of these documents and allows them not to be too far behind in terms of their reimbursement strategy, which is constantly plaguing providers. healthcare providers. Pharmacovigilance is interesting. So this is for our pharma customers, where they're basically trying to streamline the ability to capture adverse drug events. And so they get this information in different sources. It could be voice, and they convert it to text. It could be in text, could be in written form, and then digitized, obviously. But essentially, running that data through Comprehend Medical allows them to create an evolving adverse drug event database, right? So you can match it to something that's already been caught, just say in clinical trials, or maybe something that's new. So the ability for them to go through this data quickly, again, giving these people a superpower in order to get through their caseloads a lot more quickly. With PHI compliance, we are going to talk about data masking, which is a very strong use case for the service, but also PHI compliance in general is extremely important. We have customers that are building a distributed trace system on top of the PHID API, where they're able to track PHI and any of the documents that are flowing between the different systems in a provider ecosystem. So being able to do that and just say, there's PHI here, and push that into a different database or manage that differently is important for our customers, especially when there's a lot of information flowing through, just say, a large provider network where there's multiple hospitals and clinics involved. Clinical trial management, again, I talked about identifying patients, but also during clinical trials, there's a lot of unstructured data that's created. So how do you actually streamline that process and help improve the overall ability of pharma companies or CROs to manage this information effectively? Beyond that, I like talking about what else, because there's a lot of different use cases that we've seen customers use the service that we didn't think about when we launched. Some customers are running it through PubMed articles and creating a knowledge graph based on therapeutic area. It's a lot of different things that they're looking at. So it's really interesting to see how customers have been using the service, but these are the 5 major use cases that we've seen so far. With Comprehend Medical, we've spent a lot of time publishing material, putting things out there, whether it's science or even blog posts, just to show that our models are state of the art, and we're constantly giving blueprints for customers in terms of how to use the service. We look at all these AI ML services as Lego blocks, and you really want to piece them together to create that pipeline. And these blog posts are specifically around helping inspire customers to do that. And some of them end up in an AWS solution. I mean, the de-identifying medical images and identifying and working with sensitive healthcare data, both of those combined together led to the AI-enabled data masking solution that we're going to talk about today. So in the end, there's a lot of really good things that come out of it, and I recommend you looking for all the public assets that we put out there. They've been very useful for customers so far. Here's some of the scientific papers that we've actually published as well. And again, really trying to show that our model's at state of the art. And because we've combined different features into a single API call for medical NLP, we wanted to piece out each one and tell you why we think each kind of layer, if you will, is something that's unique and different. And I definitely recommend looking at these papers as well. Here's some resources in terms of the video, and again, I recommend going to aws.amazon.com/health to just see how other healthcare organizations are using AWS. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Recognition, which is the other service that we're using. And if you guys remember in that 3-level stack, it's one of the services. Again, if you break it down by vision, you have voice, you have text, and we have chatbots and a couple other services that are leveraging what we've built at Amazon.com with Personalize and Forecast. We're really trying to make it easy for developers to integrate, cutting-edge AI ML services into their tech stack. And Recognition is something we like talking about because we are leveraging it in the data masking solution that James is going to talk about. So Amazon Recognition basically applies machine learning to extract information from images and video. So it's a service that has been used in a lot of different use cases, not necessarily in healthcare, but across the board. And we've seen really great success around the use cases that they've been targeting. If you look at some of the features from Recognition, again, identifying faces, identifying celebrities, being able to label, getting the text out of an image, which is something that we're going to be leveraging, looking at moderation, paths, scenes. So there's different kind of features that you can leverage Recognition for. And I think it would be also good to mention that we have a service that's part of the Recognition family called TextRact. And Textract is our OCR solution. So essentially, think of a scanned prescription or a scanned fax, and you want to convert that into digitized form. You would use Textract. And also, it's worth mentioning that Textract is HIPAA eligible. So you can actually build a relevant clinical pipeline with basically running the information through Textract, digitizing it, and then kind of reconstructing that unstructured document, running it through Comprehend Medical, and capturing the clinical entities. So being able to do that at scale allows us to really cover the different types of, I would say, data sources that you find in a typical patient electronic health record. If you have information that's already digitized, that's great. But if you have information that's scanned, you can run it through Textract and Comprehend Medical. And as you can see, we're providing enough services to cover the different types of data sources that are actually created. And I think that's extremely valuable because we want to make sure that everything that we put out allows you to achieve the, kind of that end use case requirement that you have. And Textract is a service that we work with, that we've seen our customers use quite a bit so far with Comprehend Medical, and with the HIPAA eligibility, we know that's going to definitely increase. So with that, I'm going to pass it to James, and he's going to talk about the solution that this webinar is about, the AI-powered health data masking. Thank you.
Hi, I'm James Wiggins. I lead our team of solutions architects at AWS focused on helping academic medical centers. And I'm happy to talk to you today about a solution that I helped to create along with Aaron Friedman, who's another solutions architect at AWS working with healthcare customers. And it's the AI-powered health data masking solution. And so like Arun shared, this work really began from some blog posts that Aaron and I worked on around redacting and masking PHI from within medical images and text. And what we've done is combine those together with some other AWS services like Amazon API Gateway in order to make those functions very easily accessible via a REST API, and really allowing you to kind of combine those functions, text PHI masking and PHI masking from within a medical image, to combine those functions with anything else that your organization wants to do, applications or creating data lakes. We'll demonstrate all of that. And so like Arun mentioned, this builds on top of the AI services from Amazon, Amazon Comprehend Medical for the PHI detection, and then recognition for working with the image portion to detect text within the images. So we'll kind of explore how all of those elements come together to create this solution. And so I want to talk about, I mentioned that Comprehend Medical provides kind of a foundational function for this solution, and that is the ability to detect PHI from within unstructured text. And so we use this in both the text masking and image masking portions of the solution. And you can see Comprehend Medical, while Arun mentioned that there's a lot of functionality of Comprehend Medical around detecting medical entities and relationships, this is also a portion of that functionality, the PHI detection. We can explore a little bit more about how the other portions of Comprehend Medical are being used by customers, but for this solution, we'll really focus on the PHI portion and how that contributes to what customers are doing as far as data masking. And so you can see on the left here is a command. It starts with AWS comprehend-medical. And this is just an example of how simple it is to pass text into Comprehend Medical and get back information about PHI that's detected. And so this is an example of how it's used from the AWS command line interface. We'll see in a minute in the demo how you can use it from the AWS SDK in Python or many other languages. But you can see basically you're able to pass in that text in orange, which just represents some unstructured text that may or may not contain PHI. And what you get back is the information on the right side. So you pass this information in via the command line interface or via the SDK, single API call, and you get back the information on the right, which identifies and detects all of the PHI from within that unstructured text blurb. And so you can see that on the right, within this text object, it's detecting that Mr. Smith probably represents a name and 63 probably represents an age. So not only is it telling you that this text may be PHI, or it's detecting it as PHI, but it also tells you the type of PHI that it believes that this text is. And so you can see how this capability is kind of foundational to the overall solution that I'll demonstrate. And it also really shows how Amazon AI services, or like Arun mentioned, kind of democratizing this machine learning ability where I don't have to annotate training data, I don't have to train a model or learn how to implement and host that model if my use case is covered by these high-level AI services that Amazon is making available. And I can just pay per use of an existing machine learning model, and it's kind of instantly available to me in kind of a very simple way. And so you can see this is a block diagram for the overall AI-powered health data masking solution architecture. And you can see how it combines the capabilities of both Rekognition and Amazon Comprehensive Medical in order to present these REST APIs and this functionality. And so what this means is that when we provide a solution from Amazon, this is code and an architecture that is automatically deployable within a customer's AWS account, and that they can easily and quickly get started using this functionality. And so in the case of this solution, what you get is automation using a service called Amazon CloudFormation. And so you run that automation within your account, and in a few minutes you have the elements represented here deployed inside of your account. So we use, like I mentioned, Amazon API Gateway in order to present the REST APIs. We use Lambda functions in order to interact with the other AI services from Amazon. But really your interface as a user is just making the REST API call, which you could do in any way that you would normally make a REST API call. You could do that via the command line like curl, you could do it via code like how I'll demonstrate in Python, but it just becomes very easily accessible and integratable into your existing ecosystem where you want to take advantage of the capabilities of masking PHI from either text or images, but without a lot of the heavy lifting of training your own machine learning model and implementing this infrastructure. This solution just makes that very easily accessible for customers. And so you can see the first 4 APIs that are listed here from the top are about working with images, and they kind of get progressively more complex in terms of the functionality of the capability of this solution. So we're starting with the /images API, which just allows you to get a pre-signed URL for an image that's in S3, our storage service, our object storage service. And so the idea here is that you're able to take images from your PAC system or your VNA, you're able to put them inside of Amazon S3, and then you'll be able to act on them with the other image API functions. And so this first API just allows you to get a pre-signed URL that you could use in an application or give to a user that would allow them to view that image. So when you store an image in S3 by default, it's secured. No one has access to it except for the folks that you've granted access within your Amazon account, so it's completely private. And so integrating this images API into your application or into your workflow would allow you to then share that individual image with someone else if you give them the URL. The next function, the images text API, allows you to use Rekognition. So you pass in via a REST API call the location of the image, and what you get back is a JSON object that contains the text locations within the image. We'll see that demonstrated. And then the next level from that is the /images/PHI API, which combines that previous functionality again with Amazon Comprehensive Medical. But now you're passing in an image via a REST API call, but instead of just getting back the text locations within the image, we're also using Amazon Comprehensive Medical to identify, well, what of that text is detected to be PHI? And so now with this API, we're returning a JSON object that contains the PHI locations within the image, so bounding boxes for the text that is detected to be PHI. And the last and final image API function is kind of the most complex and full-featured REST API, and that is you pass in the location of the image that you want to analyze, that you want to mask. And then you also pass in a location that you want that masked image to be stored. And Amazon Recognition and Amazon Comprehend Medical are used to detect text within the image, to detect what of that text is PHI, and then also to mask that PHI from within the image and to write out a masked image into S3. And so we'll see all of that functionality demonstrated, but you can see how the capabilities kind of build as you come down the image API list to the most full-featured, which would be, just to create a masked copy of that image. But you can use whatever of these incremental APIs make sense for your application. And then very similarly with text, right? We have two text APIs, one where you're able to pass in unstructured text and receive back the locations of what Amazon Comprehend Medical detects to be PHI within that text blurb, or you can pass in text and just receive back a masked copy of that text. And we'll see how that functionality works as well. And so now I'll switch over to my Jupyter Notebook environment. Okay, so I'm in my AWS account now, and I have a Jupyter Notebook instance opened. I've already deployed the AI-powered health data masking solution in my AWS account. You can see it here in CloudFormation, and it's created all of the resources that are required to be able to make these REST API calls. In the Outputs tab, you can see some of the unique identifiers for these REST API endpoints in API Gateway. And so really deploying this is as easy as just running the automation using the documentation from the solutions landing page. And in a few minutes, you have all of the necessary resources created in your account. You have this outputs list. Then you can use that along with some sample code to get started using these APIs. And so you'll see I've already copied and pasted the unique identifiers for my API, for my AI-powered health data masking APIs into my source code. This is all secured by our identity and access management service. And so these APIs aren't open for anyone to use. They're just open for the individuals and compute entities within your AWS account that you've granted access to make calls to these. And so when I deployed my Jupyter Notebooks instance, I deployed that using Amazon SageMaker. One of the functions, Arun spoke about this service earlier, it's really an end-to-end workflow for creating and training your own custom machine learning models, all the way from building and training to deployment and hosting. I'm really just using a small portion of SageMaker, which is the managed notebook instance. So I'm using it to give me a Jupyter Notebook environment with Python that I'll use to demonstrate these APIs. And so the first step here is I'll demonstrate the text masking APIs. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a string variable here with a payload that contains my synthetic PHI. So you can see this is kind of a subset of information you might typically find in clinical notes that were extracted from an electronic health record system, or really ostensibly kind of any unstructured text that may or may not contain PHI. And so so we've synthesized some information here as an example. And what I'll do is I'll use the /text/PHI API. I'll pass this information in, and then I'll print out the response that I receive from this API call. And so what it's going to help me do is identify the locations of PHI within this text. So I'll run the API. It passes the information into the REST API endpoint. It does an HTTP post to pass that information in, and then what I get back is, you can see I've printed out the original text again, and below that I've printed out the JSON object that identifies the PHI that Amazon Comprehend Medical detected. And so you can see it's a JSON object that contains every entity that Comprehend Medical detected as being PHI. So you can see Carlos Salazar here was detected as being PHI, but was also detected as being of type name. And I get a confidence score here that lets me know how confident Amazon Comprehend Medical believes that it is in the fact that this is PHI of type name. And you can see I received back this information for every entity that was detected as being PHI from within this text. And so kind of moving down to the next, kind of the more advanced function of this solution, the text masking function, I'm going to do basically the same thing. You can see the code is still very simple, and it's basically the same, but now I'm indicating the /text/mask API. And so I'll pass this in, I'll pass my payload in, and then I'll print out the text that was returned. And you can see here now it looks a little bit different, right? So the name Carlos Salazar is gone. It's been replaced by the type of PHI that Amazon Comprehend Medical believed that it was. So it's been masked in that sense. Where now instead of the actual name, I just have the identifier name. Instead of the unique identifier here, I have the type ID, and the same for date of birth. Instead of the actual date of birth, I have date. So you can see how this API allows you to kind of quickly and easily integrate, a single REST API call into an application or workflow that you have where you want to create a masked copy of unstructured text that contains PHI, in a very kind of easy and quick and programmatic way. We'll also take a look at the image masking functions of the solution. So what I'm going to do here is, as I mentioned, the images are stored in Amazon S3, and so these could be extracted from your PAC system, your VNA system. These could be, kind of ostensibly any source of images that could contain protected health information that you want to detect and then mask. And so I'll go ahead and set these kind of initial parameters of the bucket where my image information is stored, the actual image that I want to pass in, and either detect PHI within or create a masked copy, and then my destination key. So basically what I'm saying here is that I want to pass in this image, and later on when we create a masked copy, I want to store that in the masked / key. So I'll put all of my masked copies of images in this kind of / masked so-called sort of subdirectory, if you will, inside of the S3 bucket. And so the first function that I'll demonstrate is the one that allows you to get a pre-signed URL for an image. And so I've already set up, here's my input image, sample.png. And so I'll pass in this information into the /images API. And what I get back here is, again, this image is stored in S3, it's secured. No one has access to this image except for the users that I've defined within my AWS account. So it's not accessible to anybody else. But with this API, I can create a pre-signed URL that I can use to temporarily grant access for people to be able to view this image. So I'm going to use this function so that we can actually see what this image is. So you can see here what we've got is a frontal chest X-ray with some synthetic PHI that's so-called burned into the image. And so when I've been working with customers in the past, they've presented this challenge to me where they have huge repositories of medical images. Like, let's say they're, for instance, a provider. They have an academic medical center, and they have an affiliated hospital system, and they have more than a decade worth of medical images that they'd love to be able to leverage for research, but there's challenges around those images containing protected health information, and not in a way that's easily removable, that's actually a part of the image, which is in the case of many kind of medical image systems, they can produce images where PHI has actually become it's part of the pixel data, or burned in, so to speak. And so this is a situation that we've kind of synthesized here with some synthetic PHI. And so we'll use this image on the rest of the functions to be able to see, how does this solution actually work. So now I'll demonstrate the images text API. So again, this is using Amazon Recognition to detect the location of text within the image. So I'll pass in the location of the image in S3, and what I get back is a JSON object that contains all of the detected text within the image. You can see I get a confidence score as well. And then importantly, I get a bounding box for the location of that text within the image. This information is available through this /images/text API, and the heavy lifting here is being done by Recognition. Then for the next API call, the images PHI API, what we'll get back, I'll do the same thing. Basically, you can see the code is very similar, but I'm indicating the resource ID here that maps to the images PHI API. And so I'll run this. And what I get back this time is I get back a JSON object again, but this time it's not all of the text within the image. It's only the text that Amazon Comprehend Medical believed was that it detected as potentially being PHI. So you can see I'm getting back what is possibly a unique identifier here, what it believes is possibly a date here, and then also a name, and I'm getting back again, importantly, this bounding box information. So this is kind of the combination of Amazon Comprehend Medical and Recognition to give me a list of adjacent objects that it contains. Text that was detected as being PHI, and then its location. And then you can kind of see how we would use this information together in this kind of final API call that I'll demonstrate, the images mask API. Which now I'm passing in additional parameters here, not only the image that I want to use as an input, but then also where do I want to store the output, because we're going to produce a masked copy. So I'll give it that additional information as well. And you can see it runs quickly. You pass in the information, and you get back an S3 URI of where the output image was stored. And again, it's kind of in the /mast subdirectory, and I have a masked copy of that sample image. So what I'll do in this case, again, I'll just use this image pre-signed URL to give me a URL so that I can view that image. So I'll take my URL here, and we'll compare the original with the output. So you can see how this final API has combined the functionality of the previous APIs to not only detect the location of text within the image, and then use Comprehend Medical to determine to detect if that text is PHI, but then it's also taken it a step further and gone ahead and masked with these kind of red boxes, masked that PHI out of this image. And so now what I have is an image that has that PHI redacted or masked, and it really opens up the possibilities of what I could then do with this image, whether I want to train chest x-ray machine learning models with this image, I want to use it for research in some way. Kind of opens up the possibilities now that that this image has had its PHI redacted. So you can see again kind of the original image, and then after running that simple API call a few seconds later, I now have this copy. So again, kind of what Arun mentioned, and that is making these very complex tasks easily accessible to developers via a simple API call. And so I think, like I mentioned, this kind of opens up the realm of possibilities of what you can do with your data now, data that's contained within electronic health record systems, data that's contained within medical imaging systems, or lab data, lots of unstructured kind of sources of information that may contain PHI that customers today are limited in what they can do with this, how they can use it for research, who they can make it available to, because it contains PHI and it contains people's private information, and we want to respect the constraints of regulatory compliance like HIPAA or GDPR. And so, this kind of opens up the realm of possibilities of collaboration with other healthcare organizations and helps you meet the requirements of regulatory compliance. And many other possibilities. We've worked with many academic customers that are looking for ways to, again, take this information that they have from their affiliated clinical systems and use it to train machine learning models, to gain new clinical insights about treatment pathways, to build cohorts of patients that contain patients that have similar attributes. And this data is sort of locked away right now because they're not able to use it in this flexible manner because of the content of PHI. And so what we took a look at today was kind of an overview of AI and ML on AWS, all the way from the high-level artificial intelligence services that we make available, like Comprehend Medical and Recognition, how those manifest themselves in natural language processing on AWS using Comprehend Medical, and computer vision using Recognition on AWS, the AI-powered health data masking solution, and how you can easily implement that with sample code and deploy that within your own organization quickly, and then kind of a demonstration of how that works and kind of how that's easily accessible. And so I think the question that I would pose is, how can these solutions, the capability of being able to easily redact and mask PHI from within unstructured text or medical images, kind of, as I mentioned in the use cases slide, it really opens up a realm of possibilities that, that have been really kind of previously unavailable to many organizations that didn't necessarily have the time or the resources or the technology background to train their own custom machine learning models and try to implement these solutions. Or maybe it just didn't make sense for them. And now it's, you know, kind of very easily available through what is basically a point and click solution on AWS. And I would wonder, you know, from many of the customers that we've worked with, lots of innovative applications for how they can now take advantage of data if they're able to remove to remove or mask the PHI within it. And I would love to hear what are some other possible applications of this solution from you all as well. So I guess at this point we'll open it up to questions. Happy to answer any questions about this solution or about how it could be applied to help you all capitalize on opportunities or solve challenges at your organization.